The call came in on a sweltering afternoon in Lynwood, California. It was mid-July and the air was thick with heat and silence. A neighbor had reported a foul smell coming from a small beige house at the end of Ash Avenue, a home people rarely saw anyone enter or leave. Detective Sandra Ruiz was first on the scene. She'd worked homicide for over 15 years. But something about this one felt wrong the second she stepped out of her car. The windows were boarded, curtains drawn tight. The yard was overgrown, a child's tricycle rusting in the weeds. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. Too cold. The hum of several fans and a refrigerator filled the silence. As Ruiz stepped into the kitchen, the smell hit sharp, metallic, and sour. That's when she saw it. A blue Coleman cooler, half hidden behind a folding chair. Condensation dripped down its sides. When they opened it, the room froze. Inside was the body of 8-year-old Ethan Parker, his skin pale, lips blue, arms folded tightly against his chest, as though trying to keep warm. Ice cubes still clung to his hair. Someone had carefully placed him there, almost lovingly. The coroner would later note bruises on his arms, burns along his legs, and signs of old fractures. This wasn't just murder, it was months of slow, systematic torture. Neighbors told police they hadn't seen Ethan for weeks. His mother, Lydia Parker, had told everyone he'd gone to stay with relatives in Arizona, but no one could remember seeing any relatives visit. The father, Travis Parker, was quiet, often seen in his workshop late into the night. Locals described him as strange, a man who talked more to his tools than to people. Lydia, on the other hand, seemed timid, always looking over her shoulder, her wrists bruised, her smile forced. Ruiz knew what it looked like, another tragic domestic case. But something didn't add up. In Ethan's small bedroom, officers found something chilling. Drawings taped to the wall. Stick figures, one small, one tall, one crying, one holding something red. Beneath them, in shaky crayon handwriting, "Cold makes me quiet." The phrase haunted Ruiz. They searched the home inch by inch. Behind the couch, a hidden camera pointed toward the living room. In the basement, they found straps, an old mattress, and a metal chain bolted to the wall. The air reeked of bleach. What was this family hiding? When Lydia was brought in for questioning, she barely spoke. Her eyes were hollow, her hands trembling. "I tried to save him," she whispered once, before clamming up. Travis, meanwhile, remained calm, almost eerily so. "Kids lie," he said, smirking. Ethan was troubled. He hurt himself, but the evidence told a different story. The medical examiner found something strange. Tiny ice burns across Ethan's torso and feet, as if he'd been held against frozen surfaces for hours. His stomach showed signs of starvation, and his body bore the marks of electrical shocks. Ruiz couldn't sleep that night. She kept hearing the phrase, "Cold makes me quiet." 3 days into the investigation, police received a tip. A friend of Lydia's said she'd received a late-night text weeks earlier. It read, "He's getting colder. Travis says he won't make noise anymore." That was the moment the case shifted from horror to nightmare. Detectives searched Travis's workshop again. Hidden behind a false panel, they found a camera system footage from inside the house, stored on a hard drive. The last file was time-stamped 6 weeks before Ethan's body was found. The screen flickered. There was Travis, pacing the living room, shouting at something or someone off-screen. Then Ethan appeared, frail and barefoot, carrying a small blanket. Travis pointed toward a chest freezer. "Inside," he barked. Ethan hesitated. Travis slapped him, hard. Ethan climbed inside. The lid closed. Ruiz stopped the video there. Her hands shook. She knew she was watching a crime in progress, a child forced into his own frozen tomb. But when they checked the timestamp, something didn't match. The date on the footage was after Ethan's supposed death. If that was true, someone had tampered with the evidence. Or Ethan hadn't been the only child in that house. The next morning, Ruiz ordered a second search of the Parker property. Under the garage floor, cadaver dogs picked up another scent. A faint one, but human. By the time they broke through the concrete, the sun was setting. Officers crowded around the pit, flashlights cutting through dust and dirt. What they found wasn't another body. It was a plastic storage bin wrapped in black tape. Inside were children's clothes, small shoes, and a blood-stained blanket embroidered with the name, Liam. No record of a Liam Parker existed. No birth certificate. No school enrollment. Nothing. And then Ruiz noticed something else, a framed photo on a dusty shelf. Lydia, Travis, Ethan, and another boy, smiling faintly, his eyes the same deep brown as Ethan's. The caption on the back read, "Our boys, 2016, but Ethan was born in 2017. Ruiz froze, realization hitting her like a punch to the chest. The Parkers had another son, and no one knew where he was. The discovery of the storage bin was a gut-wrenching turning point. What had started as a single, horrifying child murder case had just doubled into a nightmare, one that stretched back years, buried under layers of silence, fear, and concrete. Detective Sandra Ruiz stared at the photograph in her gloved hands. It showed a family of 4, 2 adults, and 2 young boys. One was Ethan, the boy whose tragic fate had brought them here. The other child was roughly the same age. His name was Liam, but according to every state record, there had never been a Liam Parker. The next morning, Ruiz drove to the county clerk's office, determined to find a ghost. She searched through birth certificates, hospital records, and adoption papers. There was nothing. It was as if someone had meticulously erased Liam from the world. Back at the precinct, the interrogation room buzzed with palpable tension. Lydia Parker, the boy's mother, sat in the corner, her hands cuffed, her eyes red and swollen with unshed tears. Ruiz slid the photograph across the cold metal table, placing it directly in front of her. "Who is Liam?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. Lydia looked at the picture, and something inside her seemed to crack. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "He was our first." Ruiz leaned forward, her senses on high alert. "What happened to him?" Lydia hesitated, her eyes darting nervously towards the one-way mirror, as if her husband, Travis, was watching her even now. "Travis doesn't like me talking about him," she said, her voice barely audible. He said Liam wasn't real anymore." "Wasn't real?" Ruiz repeated, struggling to comprehend the statement. "Lydia, a child doesn't just stop being real." Tears finally began to slide down Lydia's cheeks, carving clean paths through the grime on her face. "He got sick," she explained. "Travis didn't want to take him to the hospital. He said we could fix him at home. He said the world was too cruel for weak kids." Her words hung in the air, sharp and chilling. Then she whispered the most horrifying part. "When he stopped breathing, Travis, he put him in the freezer. He said it would keep him safe until God forgave us." Ruiz's stomach turned. The coroner's initial estimate suggested that the second child's remains, if buried beneath the garage, could have been there for years. This meant Liam's death had likely happened long before Ethan's abuse began. And suddenly, a horrifying theory started to form. Maybe Ethan's suffering wasn't random. Maybe it was a continuation, a sick, twisted pattern. Ruiz's partner, Detective Harold Mills, was piecing it together at the same time. "He killed Liam first," Mills muttered back at their desks. "Then he tried to replace him with Ethan. When Ethan started asking questions, or maybe just wasn't the perfect replacement, he punished him the same way." But the biggest question still loomed. Why keep Lydia alive? Why would a monster like Travis, so obsessed with control, allow his wife to remain a witness to his atrocities? That night, the answer started to emerge. While combing through Travis's workshop for a second time, detectives found another clue: a small handheld camera, buried beneath piles of greasy tools and sawdust. The SD card inside contained a single video file, time-stamped just 8 months prior. The video opened with Travis sitting at his workbench, talking directly to the camera. His face was gaunt, his expression eerily calm, his voice almost mechanical. "They don't understand what I'm doing," he said, as if explaining a simple hobby. "But one day, they will. The cold purifies. It preserves innocence. Ethan will stay perfect this way, just like Liam." He then smiled, a chilling, empty smile that held no warmth, before the video cut to black. Ruiz slammed her fist on her desk, the sound echoing in the quiet squad room. "He's not insane," she muttered to Mills. "He's methodical." When they confronted Travis with the footage, he didn't flinch. There was no denial, no remorse. "You make me sound like a monster," he said flatly. But I only did what was necessary. The world breaks kids. I saved mine. Ruiz could barely contain her rage. You tortured your son. Travis tilted his head, his eyes cold and devoid of emotion. He stopped suffering the moment the ice touched him. You wouldn't understand. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the videos, the remains, the countless bruises, Lydia's role in this nightmare remained disturbingly uncertain. Was she a terrified victim trapped in an abusive marriage, or a willing accomplice in her own son's murder? The line was blurry, but then, a new detail surfaced that sharpened the picture. Forensics traced several online purchases to her credit card: duct tape, heavy-duty freezer locks, and bulk bags of ice. The timestamps on the receipts matched Ethan's final, agonizing weeks alive. When Ruiz showed Lydia the receipts, her fragile composure finally shattered completely. I bought them, she confessed, sobbing uncontrollably. But he made me. He said if I didn't help, he'd do worse to me. To Ethan, I tried to protect him, but he always found a new way to hurt us. Ruiz's voice softened, sensing the deep-seated terror behind the words. Why didn't you run, Lydia? I did, she said, her voice trembling with the memory. Once, with Ethan, we got as far as the bus station, but Travis found us before we even bought the ticket. He dragged Ethan out by his hair. He made me watch. The room fell silent. Ruiz knew she was dealing with more than just a murderer. This was a case of absolute domination, psychological warfare, and a level of control that was hard to fathom. But there was one thing that still felt unanswered. Travis's workshop contained several locked cabinets. The police had assumed they were for tools. When they finally cracked them open, they found something far more disturbing. Inside were rows of small glass jars, each labeled with a date and a name: Liam 2015, Ethan 2022, and one that sent a chill down everyone's spine: Lydia. Inside each jar were frozen trinkets, a baby tooth, a lock of hair, a torn piece of fabric. These weren't keepsakes. They were mementos of ownership, trophies of control. The discovery made national headlines. The Freezer Father, one newspaper dubbed him. But while the world recoiled in horror, Ruiz couldn't shake one nagging question. If Travis had documented everything so meticulously, where was the rest of the footage? Technicians scoured his computers. They finally cracked one heavily encrypted drive. Inside were dozens of videos, all recorded over the last 3 years. But it wasn't the volume of footage that stood out. It was the final entry, dated only a week before the discovery of Ethan's body. The video showed the camera aimed at the kitchen. Travis stood beside the same blue cooler now sitting in the evidence lab. Lydia was there too, her body racked with sobs. Travis spoke softly, his voice a sickeningly gentle murmur. This is the last time. He'll stay with Liam now. Then suddenly, a sound from off-camera: a loud bang, a cry, and a child's voice pleading, "Mom, please." The video cut off abruptly. Ruiz's blood ran cold. Ethan had been alive during that recording. This meant Travis wasn't acting alone in those final, terrible hours. And there was something else. In the final seconds of the video, a reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator door caught her eye. It was a shadow. Someone was standing behind the camera. It wasn't Lydia. Someone else had been inside that house. Someone helping to film. Ruiz rewound the footage, zoomed in on the reflection, and froze the frame. The silhouette was slim, with a distinct ponytail, and a tattoo visible just above the wrist: a small star. She quickly checked the household records. Neither Travis nor Lydia had a tattoo like that, but a neighbor did. The same one who'd called in the strange smell from the Parkers' garage. Her name was Angela Frost, and as Ruiz would soon discover, she had a history with the Parker family that no one had ever mentioned before. The web of this tragedy was far more tangled, and far more sinister, than anyone could have imagined. Detective Sandra Ruiz barely slept that night. The discovery on Travis Parker's computer, that list of names marked cleansed, played over and over in her mind. Each file contained an address, a child's name, and a date. 18 in total. She called her captain at dawn. Within hours, teams were dispatched across Los Angeles County. Ruiz and her partner, Detective Mills, headed straight for the first address, a quiet cul-de-sac in Norwalk. The home looked ordinary. Toys scattered across a lawn, a pink bicycle tipped against a fence. But as they approached, Ruiz's stomach knotted. The curtains were drawn tight, just like the Parkers' house had been. When the officers knocked, no one answered. After the third attempt, they forced entry. Inside was eerily quiet. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant. The living room was spotless to spotless. And then, from down the hall, came a hum. The sound of a freezer. Ruiz's breath caught. They found it in the kitchen, a chest freezer identical to the one from Lynwood. When they opened it, fog poured out, the cold biting into the air. Inside wasn't a body, not this time. Just folded children's clothes, neatly stacked, each labeled with masking tape. Faith, Jonas, Ella, no bodies. But the implication was clear. In the basement, they found something worse, a circle painted on the floor in red, candles burned to stubs, and on the wall, written in careful letters, purity through pain. Cold keeps them clean. Ruiz felt her throat tighten. This wasn't just Travis's delusion. It was doctrine. They seized computers, journals, and photographs. The documents pointed to a hidden online group, the Purity Circle, an underground forum buried deep in encrypted chat rooms. Its members shared one twisted belief, that pain purified the soul, and freezing preserved innocence. Travis Parker hadn't invented it. He'd been recruited. The next few days were chaos. Police uncovered at least 7 homes across California linked to the group. Some abandoned, some lived in, all connected by one symbol, a snowflake drawn within a circle. In one of the seized files, Ruiz found a familiar name, Angela Frost. She hadn't just been a terrified bystander. She'd been part of it all along, one of the earliest members. Her nephew, Liam, had been the first victim. Travis had taken him after Angela's sister's death, and together, they'd begun what they called the preservation. When Liam died, the group celebrated him as the first clean. Ruiz's hands shook as she flipped through their messages. They talked about children like trophies, about cooling the chaos and erasing noise. It was ritualistic, systematic, and horrifyingly organized. But then Ruiz noticed something else. Timestamps. The chatroom had gone quiet for months until 3 days after Travis's arrest. A new user had logged in. Their handle was Watcher7. The message was short. He fell, but the circle stands. The next one will rise. Meanwhile, Travis sat in county jail, expressionless behind the glass. Ruiz visited him one last time, hoping for answers. "You weren't working alone," she said. "Who are the others?" Travis smiled faintly. "You've seen the list. They're hurting children, Travis. Help me stop them." He tilted his head. "You can't stop purity. It spreads in silence." Ruiz's hands tightened into fists. "You think this is purity? You tortured your sons." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, not guilt, not remorse. Pride. "I didn't kill them," he said softly. "I saved them. The cold keeps them pure. The warmth. That's what ruins everything." Ruiz stood. "You're never leaving that cell." As she turned to go, Travis spoke again, his voice a whisper through the receiver. "Then watch your own house, detective. They always start with the ones who ask too many questions." She froze, staring back at him. His smile never faded. 2 weeks later, the FBI joined the investigation. Dozens of arrests followed, but the Purity Circle was more elusive than anyone imagined. The servers hosting their chat rooms were overseas, bouncing through layers of encryption. Then one night, Ruiz got a text from an unknown number. "You found us once. Don't make it twice." Attached was a photo of her car, parked in front of her home, taken only hours earlier. She didn't sleep that night. Neither did Detective Mills. The next morning, the house next to hers, an abandoned rental, was found burned to the ground. Inside, investigators found scorch marks shaped like a circle, with a faint snowflake in the center. No fingerprints, no suspects, no trace of who lit the fire, just the lingering smell of gasoline and melted ice. Months later, the Parker case went to trial. Lydia pleaded guilty to child neglect and testified against her husband, revealing the full horror of their home. Angela Frost took a plea deal, providing access to encrypted Purity Circle records in exchange for a reduced sentence. Travis showed no remorse, no emotion. When the verdict was read guilty on all counts, life without parole, he looked directly at the camera and said, "The circle continues," and then he laughed. A year later, a quiet suburban family in Oregon reported their 10-year-old son missing. Police found his body 3 days later wrapped in plastic, stored in a garage freezer. On the wall, someone had written in red marker, "Cold makes me quiet." The handwriting matched Ethan Parker's, but the Parkers were gone, buried, and behind bars. Ruiz stood at that new scene, staring at the words, her heart sinking as she realized what Travis meant. All along, the purity circle hadn't ended in Lynwood. It had only just begun. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what's coming next. Because somewhere, behind another closed door, another freezer hums quietly waiting. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the next case will take you even deeper into the dark truth behind the purity circle.